Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. We're going to talk about Jewish people, we're going to talk about phylacteries, and we're going to talk about something that got fixed in the tabletop role-playing game community that I think was fixed in Dungeons & Dragons a long time ago, Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. Alright, so Paizo just made an official announcement that no longer would, that they made an official announcement and said, going forward, the term phylactery will no longer be used in the Pathfinder game. And the reason it will no longer be used in the Pathfinder game is it was being used as what liches used to keep themselves alive. So, actually, I think this was in Dungeons & Dragons 1st and 2nd edition. And it's been out at least in 5th edition. I don't think the term phylactery's ever been used in 5th edition in any way, right? But Pathfinder was using the term phylactery to be the objects that liches use to keep themselves alive, right? Now, why was this a problem? Well, first of all, I was a little surprised. I hadn't done the math on this myself. So I knew that phylacteries used that in older editions of the game, the game would refer to liches and it would say, actually, I just had a conversation literally like 6 months ago. We came across a lich we were actually talking about a revenant, and somebody says, oh, like a lich. And we're like, well, lich is different, and the person was like, well, what's a lich? They're just a strong skeleton. And I was like, no, that's not correct. Liches are, and I just repeated my understanding from older versions of the game. I was like, liches preserve their life through these things called phylacteries, and basically the way it works is a lich doesn't die until all of the phylacteries they put their soul into, shards of their soul into, are destroyed. And actually, just so you're aware, the word Horcrux is used in Harry Potter exactly the way phylactery is used in older versions of these fantasy games, right? And I do think it was referred to that way in some of the older versions of Dungeons & Dragons. Well, just in 2021, Pathfinder was like, we're no longer going to refer to this. And I was like, oh, okay, I kind of get that, because I realized phylacteries are like these little boxes that very Orthodox Jewish people keep rolled up scripture in. Okay, because there's a part of the Bible that says bind it to your head and bind it to your clothes, and so they use these phylacteries to literally bind the scriptures to themselves, right? And that's my understanding, right? And so I knew what a phylactery was, and I was like, well, how's that a problem that they use this for, in Dungeons and Dragons, right? Because in Dungeons and Dragons there are pictures with people with crucifixes on them, right? Like on swords and things like that, right? And crosses, right? I'm like, that's, it's interesting. And I was like, why is the phylactery, I literally didn't know why the phylactery was an issue with the lich. And then the article said, well, the reason they got rid of it is like, phylacteries aren't bound to like, lawful good aligned planetars. They're only used by super evil liches. And this is a real sacred object for some Orthodox Jews, right? And I was like, oh, man, that's bad. Like, that's very bad, right? That's not good at all, right? So I realized immediately, this was offensive to Orthodox Jewish people, right? Or anybody who uses phylacteries. And I was like, yeah, that's a problem. I'm glad we got that out, right? So what's interesting about this? One, I think it's fantastic that the tabletop role-playing game community continues to seek to not be offensive to people, right? In any way, right? I think that's a good thing. We shouldn't be offensive to a group of people based on how they choose to live. I don't think it's not good. We shouldn't do that, right? So I really applaud Pathfinder doing it. I think they did it a little late, right? And I'm very proud of Dungeons & Dragons doing it way before Paizo got around to it, right? So, I think that's good. And I think when Dungeons & Dragons did it, what they did is they didn't do an announcement. They just stopped doing it, which seemed wise, right? Like, it seemed like a good way of doing it, And the other thing that I really took away from, so one, I'm really glad, that our hobby overall is no longer, being offensive to Orthodox Jews in this way. That's great change, right? Here's one more thing, right? So when the article talked about this, and when Paizo was like, we need to stop doing this because our game is having real world detrimental effects on real people, right? Here's what I pose back to you. They're right about that. But what if a game can have real life IRL benefits to people? Not only can it be harmful if we're not careful, but if we are careful, can we use these games, air quotes, to make real life benefits to people? I say yes. That's what I'm saying. Let's not cower in fear about offending people because the power of the game can be so dangerous. Let's make the change and embrace the fact that just as the game can be harmful if we're not careful, but if we are predetermined to get the best out of the game, it can actually be incredibly beneficial, right? So no one has any problems accepting that the game can be harmful, but I get constant pushback from the idea that the game could be beneficial at levels that were never before expected. All right? So just think about that. Yes, the game could be harmful if we're not paying attention, but it can be transformatively beneficial if we set that out as a goal and pursue it, and even acknowledge that the game was designed to do far more than anybody ever expected. Well, that's my opinion. Once again, props to Pathfinder, and props for Wizards of the Coast for doing it way before Paizo and Pathfinder. And I'm really glad, and also I'm glad I now realize that, I never put that together. I never did the math in my head that this was offensive to Orthodox Jews. And I'm like a big Jewish person stan. I really like, so I have favored nation statuses. America's my favorite nation because I live here. Next is Japan. Then after that is Israel. I'm a huge Jewish people stan. I think they have, Jewish people have just a really delightful amount of wisdom. They're just a very kind and tolerant people, and they're just some of my favorite people on the planet. I really like Jewish people, and I should say I have a really distinct love for their culture. All that's my opinion. What's your thoughts on? Actually, did you know this before? Was I just the only one that was ignorant and didn't realize this was a problem? Did you know this before Paizo knew it? I'd love to know. And also, is there a way that I can be more aware of these kind of things? It shouldn't have taken me this long and seen it in an article to figure this out. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.